The stars have always been silent. This is the first truth any spacefaring species learns, not in their academies or their temples, but in the hollow chambers of their hearts, when they first look upon the infinite dark and understand, truly understand, that the universe does not care whether they exist. It does not mourn when civilizations fall. It does not celebrate when empires rise. It simply continues, vast and indifferent, as it has for 14 billion years.
I have lived long enough to see that silence break, and I have lived long enough to see it return. I have watched stars die. I have watched species ascend to power and crumble to dust within what the universe would consider the span of a single breath. I have chronicled the rise and fall of 17 interstellar civilizations, each one convinced of its own permanence, each one wrong.
My name is Veroth Solnkai. I was the third voice of the Korath Dominion, keeper of our histories, witness to our glory. For 12,000 years, my people ruled a sphere of space spanning 400 systems. We were old when the light from Earth's first campfires was still traveling through the void. We were ancient when humanity was still painting on cave walls, still believing the stars were the eyes of gods.
We dismissed them, of course. Everyone did.
I remember the first surveys, conducted perhaps 300 of their years ago. A small world, blue and white and green, teeming with a species that had only just discovered how to split the atom. They were killing each other over territory, over ideology, over resources. Their transmissions leaked into space, crude electromagnetic signals filled with music and mathematics and declarations of war. We listened for a time, as one might observe insects building a hive, curious.
Briefly entertaining, ultimately irrelevant.
They would destroy themselves, our analysts concluded. All young species did. The great filter would claim them, as it had claimed so many others. We assigned a monitoring station to their system, logged them in our archives as species 7412, and moved on to more pressing matters. That was our first mistake. We made many more. The recursion came from the spaces between galaxies. We do not know what they are. Whether they are machines built by some long-dead civilization, or something that evolved in the cold dark, or something else entirely. They do not communicate. They do not negotiate. They do not conquer in any way we understand the word. They simply arrive, and where they arrive, everything ends. I remember the day we received word that the outer colonies had gone silent. 14 systems, 32 billion lives, gone between one subspace pulse and the next. No distress calls, no warnings, just absence. We sent fleets, the greatest armada the Korath Dominion had ever assembled. 12,000 warships, each one capable of shattering a moon. We had weapons that could ignite the hearts of stars. We had shields that could withstand the fury of supernovae. We had fought and won 100 wars across 12 millennia. The fleet lasted 4 hours. I was on the command station when the last signal came through. Admiral Keth Voran, a warrior I had known for 3 centuries, a being I had once called friend. His voice was steady, even at the end, even as his flagship broke apart around him.
They adapt, he said. Every weapon we use, they learn. Every strategy we employ, they counter. They are not fighting us, Veroth. They are studying us. And when they have learned everything we can teach them,
the signal cut to static.
then silence.
That silence has followed us ever since. We ran. There is no shame in admitting this now. The great Korath Dominion, rulers of 400 systems, inheritors of 12,000 years of civilization, we ran like prey animals before a fire. We evacuated what worlds we could. We abandoned what worlds we couldn't. We watched on long-range sensors as system after system went dark, the recursion advancing at a pace that seemed almost leisurely, as if they knew we had nowhere to go. Within 6 cycles, we had lost half our territory. Within 12, we had lost 2/3. Our population, once numbered in the trillions, dwindled to billions, then hundreds of millions. Refugee fleets scattered across the galaxy, seeking shelter with species we had once considered beneath our notice. Most refused us. The Veth Consortium closed their borders and fired upon any vessel that approached. The Arkelian Collective offered sanctuary, and then sold our coordinates to the recursion in exchange for their own survival. It bought them 3 additional months. The hegemony of pale stars simply vanished, every world and station abandoned overnight, their entire civilization relocating to a destination they refused to share. We were alone, dying, desperate. And then someone suggested the humans. I remember laughing, actually laughing, despite everything. The humans? The primitives who had only achieved faster-than-light travel 2 centuries ago? The violent children who had nearly destroyed themselves a dozen times over? What could they possibly offer us? But we had no other options, and so, with the last functioning diplomatic vessel in our fleet, I was sent to make contact with species 7412. To beg, if necessary.
I expected to find a minor power clinging to a handful of systems, struggling to survive in a galaxy that had already forgotten them. I expected to find primitives, barely beyond the threshold of interstellar travel, still awed by the scale of the cosmos.
I was not prepared for what I found instead. The human border station was called Meridian. It hung in the darkness at the edge of their claimed space, a modest structure by galactic standards, perhaps 3 kilometers in diameter, rotating slowly to generate gravity. There were no weapons platforms surrounding it, no defense fleets, no orbital fortresses, just the station itself, alone in the void, broadcasting a simple message in 1,000 languages. All travelers welcome. State your intentions and await guidance. My vessel was old, damaged, running on emergency power. We had fled across 100 light years with what remained of our crew, 47 souls, all that survived from a diplomatic corps that once numbered in the thousands. Our ship bore the scars of 3 recursion encounters. Our hull was patched with salvage. Our engines wheezed and stuttered like the lungs of a dying beast. We must have looked pathetic, limping toward that small station. A vessel of the once mighty Korath Dominion, reduced to begging for sanctuary from a species we had dismissed as irrelevant. I transmitted our request: asylum, refuge, anything they could spare. The response came within moments. A human voice, speaking flawless Korathi. Korath vessel, this is Meridian Station. We've been expecting you. Docking Bay 7 is clear. Medical teams are standing by. Take your time on approach. There's no rush. I stared at the communication console for a long moment. They had been expecting us? How? We had told no one of our destination.
Our flight path had been randomized to avoid recursion intercept patterns.
Meridian Station, I replied, trying to keep my voice steady. We appreciate your welcome. May I ask how you knew we were coming?
A brief pause, then almost gently. Ambassador Solnkai, we've been monitoring the recursion advance for some time. We know which Korath refugee fleets escaped, and we've been tracking their trajectories. Yours was the most likely to reach our space. We prepared accordingly.
They knew my name. They knew our fleet movements. They had been watching. I felt the first cold tendril of something I couldn't quite name. Not fear, exactly. Something deeper. Something that whispered of assumptions shattered and certainties dissolved.
We docked without incident.
The humans who met us at the airlock were unremarkable. That was my first impression, and I found it deeply unsettling. I had met with the leaders of a dozen species across my centuries of diplomatic service. The Veth were crystalline beings who communicated through patterns of refracted light. The Arkelians were hive minds, each individual a node in a vast collective consciousness. The lords of the hegemony were ancient beyond measure, their forms maintained by technology that bordered on the divine. The humans were just humans, soft-skinned, bilateral symmetry, average height, average build, nothing about them that suggested power or significance. They wore simple uniforms in muted colors. They moved with quiet efficiency. They smiled, a gesture I had learned indicated friendliness in their species, but the smiles did not quite reach their eyes. Their leader introduced herself as Commander Sarah Chen. She was small, even by human standards, with dark hair streaked with gray and a face lined by what I would later learn were years of hard experience. She carried no visible weapons. She wore no insignia of rank that I could identify. She simply stood before me and inclined her head in a gesture of respect.
Ambassador Sonkai, she said, welcome to human space. I wish we were meeting under better circumstances.
As do I, Commander. I studied her face, trying to read the emotions beneath her calm exterior. Your people have been more welcoming than I expected.
You expected us to turn you away?
I expected many things, none of them this. I gestured at the station around us, clean, functional, humming with quiet power. The Korath Dominion dismissed your species for centuries. We called you primitives. We predicted your extinction. I would understand if you harbored resentment. Commander Shen's expression shifted slightly. Not offense, not anger. Something that looked almost like amusement, though tinged with sadness. Ambassador, she said quietly, we've been dismissed before. By each other, mostly. Entire cultures of our own species spent centuries believing other humans were less than people. We've been conquered, enslaved, subjected to genocide by our own kind. She paused, and something flickered in her eyes. Whatever you thought of us, it's not new, and holding on to resentment over words spoken by beings who are now refugees fleeing extinction, that's not how we want to spend our energy. I did not know what to say to that, so I said nothing. Your people need rest, she continued. Medical attention, food, time to process what you've been through. We have quarters prepared. Everything you need will be provided. Once you've recovered, we can discuss next steps. She turned to lead us deeper into the station, then paused. I should mention, you're not the first Korath refugees to reach us. 3 other vessels arrived in the past cycle, just over 600 of your people all told. They're safe. They're being cared for. 600 out of trillions. I felt my legs weaken beneath me. One of my aides caught my arm, steadied me.
Ambassador? Commander Chen's voice was gentle. Do you need medical assistance? No. I straightened, forced composure into my posture. I was not aware any other ships had survived. There may be more. We're still scanning. The galaxy is a big place, and the recursion haven't been perfect in their coverage. There's always hope. Hope. Such a small word. Such a human word. I had read about it in their literature, their histories. They spoke of hope as if it were a force of nature, as fundamental as gravity or electromagnetism. They clung to it in circumstances that should have left no room for such sentiment. I wondered, in that moment, if perhaps we had underestimated them in more ways than we knew. The quarters they provided were modest but comfortable. The food was simple but nourishing. They had clearly researched Korath dietary requirements. The medical staff were competent, respectful, and thorough. Everything was exactly as they had promised.
And that, somehow, made it worse.
Because I had time to think, time to observe, time to notice the small details that didn't quite add up.
The station was small, yes, but its power output was enormous, far beyond what its size should have allowed. I could feel the hum of the reactors through the deck plating, a steady thrum of energy that spoke of technology I couldn't identify.
The crew was calm, yes, but it was the calm of veterans, not innocents. Every human I encountered moved with the quiet confidence of someone who had faced danger and survived. They smiled and made small talk, but their eyes never stopped watching, never stopped assessing.
And the communications chatter I could sometimes overhear, fragments of conversation in human languages I didn't speak, carried an undertone of urgency that belied the peaceful facade.
On my third day aboard the station, I requested a meeting with Commander Chen. She received me in a small office overlooking the main docking bay. Through the transparent walls, I could see ships arriving, not Korath refugees, but human vessels. Transports, freighters, ships of designs I didn't recognize, all of them coming and going with a precision that spoke of careful coordination.
Ambassador, she said, gesturing for me to sit, I hope you found your accommodations acceptable.
They have been more than acceptable. Your hospitality has been unexpected. I settled into the seat, arranging my robes around me. I find myself curious, Commander, about many things.
Ask. I'll answer what I can. Your species achieved faster-than-light travel approximately 200 standard years ago, yes?
That's correct.
And in that time, you have expanded to how many systems? She smiled that strange, sad smile again. Officially, we have settlements in 47 systems, outposts in another 30, research stations scattered across the rim.
Officially?
Officially. I waited for her to elaborate. She did not.
Commander Chen, I have been a diplomat for 400 years. I have learned to recognize when information is being managed. You have been nothing but gracious hosts, but I cannot escape the feeling that we are seeing only what you wish us to see. She was quiet for a long moment, her gaze drifting to the viewport and the ships beyond.
Ambassador Solnkai, may I ask you something?
Of course. When your people first observed humanity, what did you conclude about us?
I hesitated. The honest answer was unflattering. But she had asked, and she seemed to genuinely want to know.
We concluded that you were volatile. Intelligent, yes, but unstable.
Your history was a continuous cycle of war and recovery, advancement and regression. You came close to destroying yourselves multiple times. Our analysts predicted you would either achieve stability and join the galactic community as a minor power, or you would annihilate yourselves within a few centuries. The latter was considered far more likely.
She nodded slowly. That's fair. Honestly, there were times we thought the same thing. She turned back to face me, and something in her expression had shifted. Harder, more focused. But you missed something, Ambassador. Something that maybe only we could understand, because we lived it.
And what was that? Every time we came close to destroying ourselves, we didn't. Every war, every crisis, every moment where extinction seemed certain, we found a way through. Not always gracefully, not always without terrible cost, but we survived. Again and again, we survived. She leaned forward slightly. Do you know what that does to a species, Ambassador? Generations of staring into the abyss and pulling back at the last moment. It doesn't make us peaceful. It doesn't make us wise.
It makes us very, very hard to kill.
The words hung in the air between us. I felt that cold sensation again, stronger now, the feeling of standing on uncertain ground.
Commander, what are you telling me? I'm telling you that we know about the recursion. We've known for a long time, longer than your people think, and I'm telling you that we've been preparing.
Preparing? For what?
She held my gaze, and for the first time, I saw something behind the calm professionalism, something that looked almost like anticipation.
For this.
She showed me over the days that followed.
Not everything. I understood by then that there were depths I was not permitted to see, but enough. Enough to reshape everything I thought I knew.
The Meridian Station was not a border outpost. It was a relay point, one node in a network that spanned not dozens of systems, but hundreds. Human ships moved through routes that did not appear on any galactic chart, using technology that bore no resemblance to standard faster-than-light drives. They were not ahead of us by centuries, as I had assumed. They were ahead of us in ways I could not even properly measure. How? I asked Commander Chen as we stood in an observation lounge watching a fleet of human vessels translate into normal space. Dozens of ships moving in perfect formation, appearing from nowhere with a flash of something that was not hyperspace, not warp, not any propulsion method I recognized. Your species is 2 centuries old. The Korath Dominion spent millennia developing our technology. How is this possible?
Ambassador, do you know how many wars humanity fought in the 2 centuries before we achieved spaceflight?
Aye, many, I assume. Your history was quite violent. 2 global conflicts, dozens of smaller ones, hundreds of millions dead. And do you know what we did between the wars? We built, we innovated. We took the lessons of each disaster and poured them into making sure the next one wouldn't kill us all. She gestured at the fleet outside. Every one of those ships was designed by engineers whose grandparents survived catastrophes that should have ended our species. Every system, every weapon, every redundancy, it was all born from a culture that learned to treat extinction as a personal enemy. We didn't develop technology to explore the stars. We developed it to survive them. I watched the ships move into formation around the station. They were not large, not by the standards of the Korath battle cruisers I had known, but there was something about their lines, their proportions, that spoke of purpose, of lethality restrained.
You have been preparing for the recursion, I said slowly. For how long?
Since we first detected them. 40 years ago, one of our deep space probes picked up anomalous readings from the Andromeda galaxy.
Something was consuming star systems at an impossible rate. We didn't know what it was then. We just knew it was coming.
40 years. I felt my heart's rate increase. You have been preparing for 40 years? And you told no one?
Who would we have told? The Korath Dominion, who considered us primitives? The Veth Consortium, who refused to acknowledge our diplomatic communications? The Arkelians, who were already calculating how to profit from our inevitable extinction? She shook her head. We tried, Ambassador. In the early days, we tried to warn everyone. We were ignored, dismissed, laughed at. So we stopped talking and started working.
Shame. That was the sensation flooding through me now. Deep, burning shame. The Dominion. We received your communications. I remember them now. Warnings about an extragalactic threat. We classified them as hysteria, the imaginings of a young species seeing monsters in the dark.
I know. We kept copies of your response. There was no anger in her voice, no accusation, just a weary acceptance. It doesn't matter now. What matters is what we do next. What can be done? Commander, I have seen the recursion consume the greatest military power in the galaxy. They adapt to every weapon. They counter every strategy. They are a problem, she interrupted quietly. A very serious problem. But that's all they are, a problem. And humanity is very, very good at solving problems. Before I could respond, an alert chimed through the station. Commander Chen's expression shifted, her posture straightening almost imperceptibly. Ambassador, I apologize. I need to attend to something. Please, return to your quarters. I'll send someone to escort you.
What is happening?
She was already moving toward the door. She paused, looking back at me with an expression I couldn't read.
The last Korath signal beacon just went dark. The recursion have finished with your space. Her voice was soft but steady. They're turning toward us now. The last signal faded.
I heard those words echo through the station in the hours that followed, passed between human crew members in hushed voices. The last signal faded. The Korath Dominion, 12,000 years of civilization, 400 systems, trillions of lives, reduced to a single phrase. The last signal faded. I retreated to my quarters and sat in darkness, trying to comprehend what had been lost. My homeworld, my family, the libraries and temples and cities that had stood for millennia, the music, the art, the accumulated wisdom of 100 generations, all of it gone, all of it silenced. I expected to feel grief. I expected to feel despair. And I did, in some distant way. But mostly what I felt was hollow, empty, as if the enormity of the loss was too great to process, and my mind had simply shut down. I don't know how long I sat there. Time ceased to have meaning.
A gentle knock at my door pulled me back to awareness. When I opened it, I found a young human standing in the corridor, male by their standards. Dark skin, close-cropped hair, an expression that somehow conveyed both professionalism and compassion.
Ambassador Sonkai? I'm Lieutenant James Okonkwo. Commander Chen asked me to check on you. That was kind of her. She also wanted you to know that you've been granted access to the observation deck. If you want to see what's happening, you're welcome to join us. What is happening? He hesitated, as if weighing how much to reveal. Then he simply said, "We're responding." I followed him through the station, up through levels I hadn't known existed, to an observation deck near the station's apex. The space was large, circular, with viewports covering the entire ceiling and most of the walls. Dozens of humans sat at consoles or stood in small groups, their voices low and focused. And outside, in the infinite black, the stars were full of ships. I could not count them. I tried at first, my mind automatically attempting to catalogue and categorize as I had done for centuries. But there were too many. The void was thick with them, vessels of every size and configuration flowing outward from the station in streams that seemed to have no end.
"That's the 7th Fleet," Lieutenant Okonkwo said quietly, pointing toward a cluster of larger vessels. "And there, the 3rd, and the 12th. More are coming."
More? How many more? All of them. I stared at him. I don't understand. He led me to a holographic display at the center of the deck. It showed a tactical map of the local space and beyond. Human territory stretched across the map in blue, far larger than the 47 official systems I had been told about. Surrounding it, in red, the advancing tide of the recursion, and between them, converging from every direction, fleets and fleets and fleets. "We've been dispersed," he explained, "spread across our territory, embedded in civilian infrastructure, disguised as commercial traffic. The galaxy, the parts of it that paid attention to us, they saw a minor power with a handful of colonies and a modest defense force. That's what we wanted them to see."
And the truth?
The truth is that we've been building for 40 years. Every shipyard, every factory, every research station, all of it working toward this moment. Not because we wanted war, Ambassador, because we knew it was coming, whether we wanted it or not. The fleets continued to pour through the viewport, their numbers growing with each passing moment. I watched a formation of what must have been 200 vessels slide past the station, their hulls gleaming in the light of distant stars. "How many ships?" I asked. "In total?" Lieutenant Okonkwo glanced at a nearby console. "Last count, 73,000 combat-capable vessels, another 40,000 support craft, and that's just what we're committing to the front lines." 73,000. The Korath Dominion, at the height of its power, had fielded 12,000 warships. It had been the largest navy in the galaxy, and we had been destroyed in hours. "How?" I whispered. "How is this possible? Your species has only existed in space for 2 centuries. Where did all of this come from?" He looked at me with something that might have been pity, or might have been pride. "Ambassador, do you know what Earth's population was when we achieved spaceflight? 8 billion people, all of them on a single world, fighting over resources, struggling to survive. When we finally reached the stars, we didn't see an escape from our problems. We saw a challenge, a new set of problems to solve, and we threw everything we had at solving them." He gestured at the ships outside. "Every human alive today was born into a society that treated survival as the highest virtue. We don't build because we want to. We build because the alternative is extinction. We always have." I thought of Commander Chen's words, a species that learned to treat extinction as a personal enemy. I was beginning to understand. The recursion arrived 3 days later. I was on the observation deck when the first wave translated into the system, if translated was even the right word. They simply appeared, one moment empty space, and the next filled with shapes that hurt to look at, geometry that didn't quite resolve correctly, surfaces that seemed to absorb light rather than reflect it. Ships, perhaps, but no design philosophy I recognized. There were thousands of them. Around me, the humans did not panic. They did not flee. They simply worked, their voices calm and professional, relaying coordinates and vectors and tactical assessments.
It was the same eerie composure I had observed since my arrival, but now I saw it for what it truly was.
Not ignorance, not denial, acceptance.
They knew what was coming. They had always known, and they had made their peace with it long ago.
First contact in 12 minutes, someone announced. All fleets report ready.
Commander Chen's voice came over the station's speakers, broadcast to every deck, every ship, every corner of human space.
All units, this is Fleet Command. You know why we're here. You know what's at stake. For 40 years, we've prepared for this moment. We've built, we've trained, we've waited. Now the waiting is over.
She paused, and when she continued, her voice was quieter, but somehow more powerful. The Recursion have destroyed civilizations older than human history. They've consumed species that spanned galaxies. They've never been stopped, never been turned back, never been defeated. But they've never faced us. They don't know what we've been through. They don't know what we've survived. They don't know that we've been fighting for our survival since before we had a word for it. Today, they learn. All ships, engage.
And humanity moved. I cannot describe what followed, not adequately. Language fails in the face of such violence, such coordination, such terrible beauty. The human fleets did not charge blindly into the enemy formation. They flowed around it, encircled it, struck at it from 1,000 angles simultaneously. Their weapons were unlike anything I had seen. Beams of light that twisted space itself, projectiles that seemed to ignore conventional physics, missiles that multiplied into swarms of smaller munitions before impact.
The Recursion adapted, as they always did. They reconfigured their vessels, shifted their tactics, deployed countermeasures that neutralized entire weapon systems.
And the humans adapted faster.
I watched a Recursion construct, a massive thing, kilometers across, bristling with weapons that had shattered Korath battlecruisers like glass. I watched it engage a human battle group. It destroyed a dozen ships in the first exchange, its weapons cutting through their shields as if they weren't there. And then the remaining human vessels did something I couldn't understand. They changed. Their shields flickered, reconfigured, became something else entirely.
Their weapons shifted frequencies, energies, delivery methods. The next volley tore through the Recursion construct's defenses and left it spinning, crippled, dark.
How? I breathed. How are they doing this?
Lieutenant Okonkwo stood beside me, his face illuminated by the flashes of combat outside. "Neural links," he said quietly. "Every ship in the fleet is connected to every other ship. Every sensor reading, every tactical observation, every adaptation the enemy makes, it's shared instantly across the entire force. When one ship learns something, they all learn it. When one captain develops a counter-strategy, they all know it."
That's not possible. The processing power required.
Ambassador, the human brain can process 11 million bits of information per second, and there are 23 billion humans in this theater of operations. He smiled, but there was no humor in it. We have enough processing power.
23 billion minds linked together, adapting and learning and evolving in real time. A collective intelligence born not of technology, but of sheer, stubborn will.
I watched the Recursion try to adapt, try to counter, try to do what they had always done against every enemy they had ever faced.
And for the first time in their existence, they fell behind.
The battle lasted 3 days.
3 days of constant combat, constant adaptation, constant pressure. The humans lost ships, thousands of ships. I watched them die, watched their vessels break apart under recursion fire, watched escape pods streak toward safety and, sometimes, fail to make it. The cost was terrible. The losses were staggering. And still they fought. By the second day, the recursion were retreating, not advancing, not pressing forward as they had through all of Korath's space. Retreating, pulling back, consolidating their forces in ways that suggested, impossibly, fear. By the third day, they were running. I stood on the observation deck and watched the remnants of the recursion fleet scatter into the void, pursued by human hunter groups that would chase them for weeks, for months, for as long as it took. The immediate threat was broken. The advance was stopped. For the first time since the war began, the recursion had been defeated in a stand-up fight.
But it wasn't over. Everyone knew that. The recursion would regroup, rebuild, return. The war would continue, perhaps for decades, perhaps for centuries. Humanity had won a battle, not a war. And yet, as I watched the human crews celebrate, quietly, solemnly, with the restrained joy of those who know more fighting lies ahead, I understood something I had not understood before. They would not stop. Not because they couldn't. Not because they didn't know how, but because stopping was not in their nature. They would chase the recursion across the galaxy, across the universe if necessary. They would adapt to every new challenge, overcome every new obstacle, endure every new loss. They would keep going, keep fighting, keep surviving, long after any other species would have surrendered to despair. Because that was what they were. That was what centuries of near extinction had made them. Survivors, adapters, endurers. And perhaps most terrifyingly of all, winners. I met with Commander Chen a week after the battle. She looked tired, truly exhausted in a way I hadn't seen before. But beneath the fatigue, there was a spark of something that might have been satisfaction.
"Ambassador," she greeted me, "I'm glad you're still with us."
I have nowhere else to go, Commander. Thanks to your people, I may yet live to see the end of this war. We all may. That's more than we expected, honestly. I studied her face, this small, tired human who had commanded one of the greatest military operations in galactic history. May I ask you something, Commander? Of course. When you knew the recursion were coming, when you had 40 years to prepare, why didn't you run? You have ships that can cross intergalactic distances. You could have fled, found a new galaxy, started over far from the threat. Why did you choose to fight? She was quiet for a long moment, looking out at the stars through her office viewport. We thought about it, she admitted. In the early days, there were serious proposals to do exactly that. Abandon the Milky Way. Let the recursion have it. Save ourselves. She turned back to me. But then someone pointed out that if we ran, we'd be leaving everyone else behind. The Korath, the Veth, the Arkelians, all the species that had dismissed us, yes, but also all the ones that hadn't. All the ones that were just living their lives, not knowing what was coming. We couldn't save everyone. We knew that. But we could try. Even though we refused to listen to your warnings? Even then. She smiled, that sad, knowing smile I had come to recognize. Ambassador, humanity has been shaped by cruelty, but also by kindness, by people who refused to help, but also by people who gave everything for strangers. We remember both. We try to be the latter. Her smile faded. Besides, running wouldn't have solved anything. The recursion would have followed eventually.
They always do. Better to fight them here with allies than alone in some distant galaxy with nowhere left to retreat.
Allies? You call us allies?
Not the Korath Dominion as it was. That's gone. I'm sorry. She met my eyes directly. But you're still here, Ambassador. Your people are still here. Not many, but enough. Enough to rebuild if you choose. Enough to join us if you're willing.
Join you in what?
In finishing this. Not just defeating the recursion, destroying them, making sure they can never threaten anyone again. She leaned forward. We've been fighting alone for 40 years. We've done well, but we've been carrying the weight of this war on our shoulders without help. Now that's changing. Other species are reaching out, the ones who survived, the ones who finally understand what we were trying to warn them about. We're building something new, a coalition.
A united front against the darkness. She extended her hand, a human gesture of partnership I had learned. We would be honored if the Korath would join us. I looked at her hand. Such a simple thing, such a human thing.
We had dismissed them for centuries. We had called them primitives, predicted their extinction, ignored their warnings. And now they were offering us a place at their side, not as subjects or vassals, but as partners.
I thought of the Korath Dominion as it had been, proud, ancient, certain of its superiority. I thought of what that pride had cost us, what our certainty had blinded us to. And then I reached out and took her hand.
Yes, I said. The Korath will join you, what remains of us at least.
That's all anyone can offer, Ambassador. What remains of them, what they're willing to give. She squeezed my hand gently before releasing it. Welcome to the coalition.
The war continued for another 60 years. I lived to see most of it, though my time grows short now. The recursion did not go quietly. They fought with the fury of something that had never known defeat, never experienced true resistance. But humanity and its allies fought harder. We chased them across the galaxy, liberating systems they had thought conquered, freeing species they had thought broken. We pushed them back, step by step, until finally there was nowhere left for them to run.
The final battle was fought in the spaces between galaxies, where the recursion had first emerged. I was not there. I was too old by then, too fragile for combat, even as an observer. But I watched the reports come in. I saw the images of the last recursion stronghold crumbling under the combined might of 12 species fighting as one.
And when it was over, when the last recursion signal faded into static and silence, I wept. Not for them, never for them,
but for the Korath, for all the species that had been lost before humanity rose to face the darkness, for the lives that had been cut short, the civilizations that had been snuffed out, the histories that would never be recovered.
And perhaps for the humans, who had given so much, lost so many, sacrificed so deeply, and who would never truly rest, because they knew better than anyone that the universe would always send new challenges, new threats, new reasons to fight. I am writing this account now because I am the last of the old Korath. The others have passed, their stories entrusted to the archives. Only I remain, and I will not remain much longer.
But before I go, I want the record to be clear. I want future generations, Korath, human, all the species that will come after, to understand what happened here, what humanity did, what they were and what they became. The galaxy dismissed them as primitives. We saw their violence, their division, their endless conflicts with each other, and we concluded that they were children. Dangerous children, perhaps, but children nonetheless. We believed our age and our wisdom made us superior. We believed our technology and our culture made us invincible. We were wrong. We were so terribly, tragically wrong. Because what we saw as weakness was strength. What we saw as chaos was adaptability. What we saw as violence was a survival instinct honed by millennia of existential struggle. Humanity did not reach the stars despite their nature. They reached the stars because of it. Every war, every crisis, every near-extinction event had forged them into something harder, something more resilient, something that could bend without breaking and break without dying. They did not fear the darkness. They had been born in it.
And when the darkness came for the rest of us, when the recursion descended like a tide of entropy, consuming everything in their path, humanity was already moving. They had seen the threat before anyone else. They had prepared while the rest of us slept. They had built their forces in secret, hidden their strength behind a facade of insignificance, and waited for the moment when their power would be needed.
When the last signal faded, when the Korath dominion went dark, when it seemed that all hope was lost, humanity was already moving.
They had always been moving. They had never stopped.
I am old now, older than any Korath has ever been, sustained by human medicine and human technology and human kindness. They have given me more years than I deserved, more time than I had any right to ask for. Soon I will rest, and the universe will continue without me.
But I am not afraid, because I know that when I am gone, humanity will still be here, watching, preparing, moving. They do not seek conquest. They do not desire empire. They simply endure, as they have always endured. And in their endurance, they protect those who cannot protect themselves. They shield those who once dismissed them. They fight for a galaxy that never deserved their sacrifice. This is what I have learned in my long life. This is what I want future generations to remember. Do not measure a species by its age. Do not judge a civilization by its past. Do not assume that size equals significance, or that power comes only from ancient wisdom. Sometimes the youngest are the strongest. Sometimes the most violent are the most compassionate. Sometimes the ones you dismiss as primitives are the only ones who will be there when everything else has fallen. The humans have a saying. I have heard it many times over the decades, spoken by soldiers and scientists, diplomats and doctors. It is simple and strange and utterly human. When things fall apart, we hold them together. That's what we do. I used to think it was naivete. Now I know. It is a promise. The universe does not care whether we exist. The stars have always been silent. Civilizations rise and fall, and the cosmic dark simply continues, vast and indifferent. But into that darkness, humanity has stepped. With their stubbornness, with their adaptability, with their terrible, beautiful, unbreakable will to survive. And the silence? The silence is learning to fear them. When the last signal faded, when all seemed lost, when the recursion thought they had won,
Humanity was already moving. They had been moving all along, and they will keep moving, long after I am gone, long after the memory of the Korath dominion has faded to legend.
This is their nature. This is their gift. This is the legacy of a species forged in fire and tempered by darkness.
They will not be stopped.
They will never be stopped.
And for that, in the fading light of my final days, I am grateful. Eternally, profoundly grateful.